So now if I could shift to Afghanistan, and I think you've already helped prepare the conversation to shift that way by explaining general principles of counterinsurgency, but also the specifics of Iraq that were important there. And that would imply that some things are transferable and some things aren't. So I'd like to hear your comment on that. But I also am curious, sort of your gut level of confidence going into this new approach to Afghanistan that's still being implemented, compared with your gut level of confidence 3 years ago about Iraq. And I know it's a hard question to answer. I'm not asking you to quantify the probability of success, but as strategists, we all have to think about the prospects of our mission in Afghanistan. I know that's what's on President Obama's mind to some extent. Before he further reinforces the mission, he wants to have some feel for, is it really doable? What are our prospects for making progress? How do you view it in a situation where some people have said Afghanistan is even harder than Iraq, even a tougher proposition? What are our odds of at least moderate success in this venture?
Bill, I mean, first of all, I don't handicap these kinds of things, needless to say. But if you go back to Iraq, when I went back over there for the final tour as the commander of the multinational force in Iraq, a lot of us had spent quite a bit of time on the ground. I went back having been on the ground for well over 2 1/3 years. And we'd spent the time when we were back in the States studying it very hard, of course, producing the counterinsurgency manual, as was mentioned earlier, and trying to, really intellectually come to grips with what we needed to do there to identify best practices, worst practices, institutionalized lessons that had been learned, and so forth. And when we went back, I really felt that we could make progress. The question was the issue of the two clocks. Was the Washington clock, if you will, going to run out before the Baghdad clock started moving? We used to joke about the fact that the Washington clock, the Capitol Hill clock, if you will, was sort of racing forward. You could almost see the alarm about to pop up. And on the other hand, the Baghdad clock, you'd sort of hit it a couple times a day to see if the thing was still working or wonder why it was in reverse. And of course, we were staring in the face from the very beginning in awareness, I was, after my confirmation hearing in January 2007, in awareness that come September or so, I was going to have to go back and testify, and this was going to be a big deal. And if we didn't have progress by then, we were going a lot of trouble, frankly. It would be very difficult. And, the policy in some respects, again, Ambassador Crocker and I very much shouldering that at various points in time as mood was very challenging. As you shift to Afghanistan, you first, I think, have to recall, the primary lesson of counterinsurgency, which is that all counterinsurgency operations are local, just like politics. Second, you therefore have to recognize a need for a truly nuanced and granular appreciation for local circumstances, to truly understand what the social organizing structures are, the culture of that particular area, not just of the country as a whole. Who are the power brokers? What are the official power structures? Are they the same as the unofficial power structures, which is not the case in certain areas of the country, which is an interesting phenomenon. How is it supposed to work? How does it really work? What is good enough? Keep in mind we're not trying to turn Afghanistan into Finland or anything like that, or Sweden or something. We're trying to help Afghanistan reestablish traditional social organizing structures. And that means at the basic level, the traditional mullahs, the traditional tribal leaders, who in many areas have been pushed aside or killed or run off by the Taliban and the more extremist leaders that they have brought in as they have had a resurgence. There's a very good article in Newsweek, I think it's 3 weeks ago or so, it was a cover article that describes this process of the Taliban having been defeated in late 2001 in Afghanistan, being dispersed to hundreds of villages and communities in Pakistan and various remote areas of Afghanistan, and gradually reconnecting with each other and gradually coming back into Afghanistan, putting their foot in the water, then pulling it out, And then ultimately you're starting to stay and to rebuild the infrastructure and to try to develop the cells that they had there before that, of course, at one time enabled them to take over the country, during which time, of course, Afghanistan was a sanctuary, a safe haven for al-Qaeda and transnational extremists, the ones who carried out the 9/11 attacks. We should be very clear that those were planned first in Kandahar, with training then done in al-Qaeda camps in Afghanistan before the individuals went to Hamburg and went to U.S. flight schools. That is what we are trying to prevent, of course, and to do it in a way, though, that doesn't trap us in an endless nation-building exercise, but works to enable the Afghans to, over time, take on their tasks, because they are theirs, of securing their country, of building the basic institutions that can enable them to have a better life, and therefore to achieve legitimacy in the eyes of the people and support of the people. And I think President Karzai has noted on a number of occasions the need for a host of improvements in that regard, that the levels of corruption are unacceptable, that, again, good governance has to be developed. That's something we're all seeking to help with in the months ahead, the years ahead, with his inauguration coming up on the 19th, I think. So that sort of sets the foundation, maybe the intellectual foundation for this, with a recognition that, we have learned a good bit in Iraq and also in Afghanistan, by the way, about counterinsurgency, about irregular warfare, about what works and what doesn't. And the key is to now find the right answer in each of the, literally, valleys, each of the villages, each of the districts and provinces of Afghanistan, as we help our Afghan partners reestablish security in a country where the security has deteriorated significantly in certain parts over the course of the last 2 years in particular, so that you have the foundation, the security foundation, on which all else must build. And
if I could ask you, and again, this week in the United States, we've seen reports about President Obama's continued search for the right way to frame options. I know you don't want to speak in detail about where the deliberations are, but let me still put the question sort of in a pithy way, I hope. You mentioned your good relationship with Ambassador Crocker and how crucial that was to success in Iraq. Some people here have been concerned about the apparent disagreement between Ambassador Eikenberry and General McChrystal right now in Afghanistan. Others have said there's too long and too slow a process of decision-making inside the Obama administration about what to do with General McChrystal's suggestion that if we're going to be successful, we need up to several tens of thousands additional troops. Do you have big concerns about the process of decision?